Howdy, everybody. Welcome to Liberty Libations number 172. Brad Binkley is not hosting this week. Thank goodness. Can't stand that guy. Can't have him back again. He basically ruined the show while I was gone. Now, Binkley, loved those shows. I loved watching them. For those who watched the past couple weeks, it's been Brad Binkley from the Propaganda Report who's been hosting while I was away. Yeah, go check him out if you haven't already. The dude is phenomenal at analyzing news stories and figuring out what's propaganda, what's not, where propaganda comes from. I mean, he's just an expert on all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, welcome to episode 172. Today's special guest is Josh Lewis from Saving Elephants, which is a blog and a podcast dedicated to conservatism saving the Republican Party, I believe is basically what your tagline is. So, Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Jake, good to be here. I appreciate you letting a teetotaling conservative on amongst you libertarians.
Heck yeah. Well, Josh, tell the audience a little bit about your show, your blog, how it started, and how it's going, because you've had a lot of episodes, man.
200, which is a lot when they're all original and I'm doing all the editing. Yeah, it's been a blast. Congratulations on 172, and I know it's quite a milestone. What do they say? The average podcast doesn't make past 7 episodes or something like that?
I think that's right, yeah.
You and I are definitely in the upper echelons. I never thought we'd make it, but here we are. I began many years ago, shortly after the Donald Trump's infamous descent down the golden escalators. He was not the only impetus, if you will, but he was maybe the chief one. In that I began looking around at all these fellow Republicans of mine. I was a member of, still am a member of the Republican Party, but I was actively involved in it. I was a treasurer for Tulsa County. It's not a huge position, but you know, I knew the individuals at various state and local and federal levels. And I was shocked the degree to which when they said conservative, I was like, I thought we all agreed on what that word meant, but do we not agree on what this means? Am I crazy or did everybody else change? And so Saving Elephants is my attempt to sort of do 2 things simultaneously. One is, as you had mentioned, trying to call the GOP back to classical conservative roots, which I think is a saner, more prudential, safer, and more honorable place to put things. We can disagree with conservatism, but it's at least, what do they say in The Big Lebowski? You know, say what you will about National Socialism, at least it's an ethos. It's at least better than whatever Donald Trump happens to dream up or tweet last week. But the second part to that is I found out for myself, I'd always called myself a conservative, but when I actually said, well, if I'm going to start telling other people they need to believe these things, I need to figure out what they mean myself. So as you can see behind me, I started reading Edmund Burke and Russell Kirk and William F. Buckley and Thomas Sowell and I could go on and on a list of individuals who are kind of the movers and shakers of this movement. And I was shocked the depth and clarity and power of some of these arguments. Not that I agree with all of them and not that they even agreed with each other. But it was kind of cool. It's like, why are we not talking about this stuff? This is actually kind of cool. And it's a lot better than the dumpster fires we see on Twitter or social media or in the mainstream media. And so part of it is a call to the GOP. Another part of it is an invitation to Western civilization, to the great traditions, to these arguments we've had for thousands of years. You're just cheating yourself if you're not. You don't have to be a conservative to enjoy conservative arguments, I think. You know, these are people that thought deeply and wrote well. And it can be a real joy to just dig into their arguments.
Yeah, man, I totally relate to exactly what you're talking about. I pretty much my entire life, I was a libertarian without actually being involved in politics at all. Like I didn't know what a libertarian was. I didn't have any idea what that political philosophy was, or more. I'm technically an ANCAP anarchist. So it wasn't until
by that.
It wasn't until I started reading books, and I started out with economics, like Creature from Jekyll Island and Bitcoin Standard, Fiat Standard, a whole bunch of economic related books, because I was obsessed with Bernie Sanders in college. I hate to say.
Were you a Bernie bro?
I was a Bernie bro, and yeah,
I know a handful of Bernie bros that became hardcore libertarians. That's not an unusual path.
I've met a couple of them, and it's strange it's strange in my head. That's how it went. But I think it was just listening to what his ideas were on the economic front, and then reading 2 books sent me the opposite direction of his whole mindset. So Creature from Jekyll Island was the first one that I read, and that was pretty much sealed. That's pretty much sealed the deal. And I also read Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead.
I figured Ayn Rand was in there somewhere, but sometimes there's softer paths to libertarianism through Hayek or Thomas Sowell, but you just went straight to the hard stuff.
Yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoy Ayn Rand and her writing. So Zane doesn't care for her as much, but it is what it is. He has his nerdy books too. And
I've got my own bookshelf back there if you can't see. But I did want to ask you, like, obviously you're in the game to kind of bring conservatives back to the roots that you think that they've strayed away from. How would you define what conservatism is? And I obviously have my own opinions about that. But the weakness of the Republican Party and the weakness in terms of people who call themselves conservatives ever being able to have a consistent message is that what the Republican Party does is just advocate to conserve whatever the Democrats were pushing for 5 minutes ago. This is the famous quote. I don't know if you've ever heard this, Republicans are just Democrats driving the speed limit. Where once the Democrats get in power and achieve whatever revolution they want, when the Republicans come in again behind them, they might undo 10% of what they did, but the other 90% is now what all the Republicans believe too. I mean, this is why we couldn't repeal Obamacare when we had full control of, like, when the Republicans had the presidency and both houses in Trump's first term. So I want to let you answer that question, then, and I can add some more of my own thoughts, because, like, politically, I'm obviously very libertarian. That's why I'm on the show. But culturally, I would definitely consider myself a conservative. But I think conservatives have done a poor job kind of communicating what are we conserving when we say that we're a conservative.
Yeah, see next to you there, the no one can serve two masters and no king but Christ. So I presume you have some, let's say, small c conservative cultural impulses. But you kind of asked me two questions, and I know we only have 2 hours on this show, so I'm going to try not to take up the entire time with those. The first one, I'll just say succinctly, how do I define conservatism is something I've been working on for 8 years and 200 episodes, and I've never come up with an actual succinct definition. I have come up with some that are helpful. I think it begins, Roger Scruton, I think, had probably the most succinct, which is that it begins with the sentiment that honestly you don't have to be a conservative to have, which is that we look around us, we see a lot of good things. We recognize they're taken from us very easily, but it's not easy to build good things. And so our posture towards life is one of conservation. Now, you could be a liberal and have that sort of mindset. It just depends on where we're directing that to. But I think it begins with that, with a sentiment, kind of a notion that things in life are taken from us. So let's be cautious, use prudence, and kind of build on things slowly. And I could go on from there, because obviously conservatism is much more broad and deep than that. But an answer or response rather to your second point, it is true. I do, however, think it's a little overstated sometimes, the degree to which, and I want to very carefully separate Republican Party from conservatism. They intertwine, but they are two different distinct things. If we look at the conservative movement as a whole, it has been rather successful in certain degrees and very unsuccessful in others. There are some ways in which it has won, and this may be something that you gentlemen would starkly disagree with, but say like in the international order or international policies, in a lot of ways harken back to a more Reagan-esque idea of, let's say, a strong aggressive military front against foreign enemies. On economic levels, I would argue it actually has won there too, in that you even get people like your Bill Clintons and to a certain degree Barack Obama arguing for the virtues of a free market. I don't agree with their interpretations of that, and I don't think they go far enough. But we're not dealing with, say, the LBJ 1960s or the 1970s, where we're openly asking, hey, is the Soviet Union actually a viable model that's going to overtake capitalism? Right. Which was always a ridiculous proposition, but back in the day, it was, when our parents or grandparents, or maybe were our ages, that was not, it was an open question. So I think, well, let me put it this way. Maybe the best way to explain this is in F.A. Hayek's very interestingly titled Why I Am Not a Conservative essay, which incidentally shows up in Frank Meyer's book, What is Conservatism? Hilariously. He makes this point, use a certain illustration that you did, which is essentially look, you have your classical liberals or rather your socialists and your conservatives. And the socialists are driving off the cliff, and all the conservatives can do is apply the brakes or at least slow it down. I want to turn the car around and go the other direction. Now, the problem with Hayek's analogy is even in that essay he writes, he essentially says this is a European model or understanding of the difference between a progressive or socialist and a conservative. In the United States, there may be exceptions, because here in the United States, we've been founded on different principles than just sort of a throne and altar kind of hearkening back to an older blood and soil type understanding of what it means to be a Frenchman or an Italian or a German. We are founded on principles of equality, and I don't mean in the liberal sense, or the capital L leftist sense of the word, but rather all people are created equal. We're founded in the sense that we have certain inalienable rights, and there is a degree, I think, that you can anchor a conservatism to that actually advocates for an expansion of liberty. That does not mean I am probably going to agree with you three gentlemen on what exactly we want the ends of the state to be or what policies to pursue. I guess what I mean by that is I recognize there is a real danger that we're just constantly accepting whatever the left come up with. But I do think, Frank Meyer again talked about, look, it can't be that conservatism is just concerned with conserving the status quo. Otherwise, why would they ever complain about what the left's up to? So in reality, what we're concerned about is trying to take a long 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 year view of Western civilization and saying, what does it mean to conserve that? Maybe the welfare state is part of it. Maybe it's not, but it's something that we don't have to just think back to the 1990s or 10 years ago. We can actually think back thousands of years ago to try to anchor things in something that's more historical or maybe more enduring. A lot more I could say, but you mentioned you might have follow-up, so I'll stop there.
No, I really appreciate that answer, and I appreciated when you were introducing yourself, you even bring up like reading Russell Kirk, Edmund Burke, guys like that, where it's like really trying to reintroduce these really important philosophers that stretch back, beyond 1990. Like what are we to try to remind everyone what we're trying to do here? Because even going back even more than a couple centuries, there is a lot of things about modernity that people that kind of culture just generates certain assumptions that go unexamined. And you might be surprised to hear a libertarian say this, but it's I think one thing that the left for sure, and a lot of the modern right that hasn't exactly immersed itself deeply in as much philosophy as they should, I think both of them would agree that the foundational unit of society is the individual. It's the absolutization of the individual, and then individuals come together and they choose to form different groups and associations and stuff. And it's that's true in a sense, but I would almost say that what I think a lot of conservatives have missed is kind of the communitarian aspect of it. It's a very modern assumption that we should just look at people atomically first and then build up society from that. A much more historic understanding, and what I think comes through in a lot of conservative philosophy, is that actually the community is the fundamental building block of society. And if you're going to have strong institutions and a context in which people actually can build things that will last, you're not going to be able to have that if it's each individual person's responsibility to fit themselves into society wherever they want to, because they end up not being able to do that and they get extremely lonely and then start looking to the state to fulfill all of the functions that civil society should have been doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautifully stated. I think that is a starting point, and I assume you're going to agree with me here. Can go awry in some ways. You can get your Adrian Vermeules or your Patrick Deneen's to build off of that and form a sort of illiberalism of say, well, what we need is a common good conservatism where the state is enforcing morality. Because community is so important, we now have to have the state essentially put its thumb on the scale to enhance family or our sense of community. To which the immediate objection is why do you assume you're the ones, and why do the Catholics think they're always going to be the ones in charge if we become an authoritarian state? You may not be the one deciding what morality is, But what you're saying, I think, is brilliantly stated, because this is, I think, at the heart of where, if you take socialists off the map, like before they showed up on the scene, we conservatives were fighting with classical liberals. That was our sort of sparring partner, if you will. And we were both pro-liberty. The degree to which classical liberals becomes libertarianism, I'll let you guys suss that one out. I'm not an expert there. But where one of the disagreements came from was the anthropology of the whole thing. Is it true that we're all individuals who one day got together and formed a social contract of saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we all had, we formed this thing called a state in order to uphold liberties? And if that's true, we have no historical record of that ever happening. What we do have historical records of happening is that slowly, through process of time, through community, through religious traditions, we developed understanding of humans have innate rights and they ought to be respected. And I'm not down on John Locke at all, but I think the philosopher Michael Oakeshott, I think, put this really well. I don't know if he had John Locke in mind when he said this, but he was talking about how political philosophy is much like a cookbook. Like, we understand when we're reading a cookbook that it wasn't written by some guy that just sat down thinking about it a long time, says, I wonder how to cook food. I'm just going to come up with this and just write things down. He had thousands of years prior to him of people trying. How many people had to, I think Jonah Goldberg says, how many people died before we got French cuisine? Found out which berries you can't eat or end up being poisonous. And I think that's where I call myself a Burkean conservative, because I think that's what he adds to it. That's where sort of this idea of the individual falls flat. It is true. That's the cookbook. Lockean liberalism is the cookbook. It works in a sense, but it's not cooking. It's not the thousands of years that eventually helped develop this theory. And I think we kind of get in over our skis. I was reading, Sarah Esger has a new book out about the Supreme Court, and she had a good illustration that, like, if your toilet's backed up, you don't call someone who philosophizes about toilets. You call a plumber. And it's a similar idea here that politics is necessarily something that we don't fully understand. We can develop theories and they can be helpful, but in reality, this mystery of life, if you will, is one that we can't. The opposite of this, the extremist, of course, is the Marxist, they figured it out. They wrote it down. They've got the program that all people are supposed to abide by. And I would even say, to a certain degree, classical liberals are not as extreme, but sort of like this. They posit this idea that at one point in the past, we were all the noble savages who came together and formed a cohesive society based out of just pure consent. I don't think that's how humans work. And I think from that, we can develop really interesting political ideas of, well, if that's not how we work, then maybe there's some limits to political philosophy.
We have a comment from the... Hang on, Zane. We have a comment from the audience. It says, Senator Cotton is trying to structure morality by speaking out against rescheduling marijuana. Yeah, that's Grumpy Gnome for you.
I mean, the key insight that libertarians have is never trust the government to do anything. Like, the whole common good conservative thing is really silly, as you said, because, like, throughout all of history, we've observed over and over again that the state, especially the kind of total state that we have now, is the enemy of civil society. It actively seeks to undermine it so that it can increase its own power. So anyone who thinks, we need the government to come in and, like, do the things that we wish civil society was doing, even if they're good things, it's like, that's ontologically not what the state is. You can't have it do that. And I happen to think that, like, anarcho-capitalism is an incredibly good toolbox for, like, coming up with policies that will generate the most amount of, like, abundance and prosperity. But you're totally right. That's not, like, the end-all be-all of anthropological analysis.
And that, of course, is where so let's put off to the side common good conservative, because hopefully you gentlemen have figured out I ain't that. I'm not trying to use the state to make us all better people, but I think there's one of the areas where maybe we conservatives disagree with the libertarians, and maybe I shouldn't even say disagree. I think sometimes this stuff boils down to, I don't want to call it personality types, but the things that we stay up worrying the most about. Conservatives tend to be really worried about the distinction between civilization and barbarism, more so than the distinction between, say, authoritarianism and liberty. And it's not that, I value liberty, but my concern is that an pardon me, I can't, what term did you use just a second ago?
Anarcho-capitalism.
Anarcho-capitalism is an untested and currently unverified method that would sustain liberty. And that's my big bugaboo, is what sustains liberty, what causes, because liberty, I think capitalism and liberty, I think, are dependent upon a sort of social cohesion that capitalism and liberty itself cannot create. And so we're left with the question, well, what creates it? The state's not going to do it. But as a conservative, I want to throw everything at the wall I can. And I think that includes community. I think it includes civic virtue, which can be taught and demonstrated. I think it also includes a certain measure of religious revivalism. I'm not necessarily trying to preach any one religion, even though I do ascribe to one single religion. But I think that you build liberty and order liberty off of these things. And I am open to the possibility that an excess of liberty can undermine those things.
Yeah, but the linchpin of religion, I'm assuming you're a Christian, free will. I mean, like it's you can't just legislate that away. God gave it to us. Who are we to take it away from each other? So that's one of those things. And I like how you mentioned the noble savage, because that reminds me of one of my favorite modern day philosophers, Michael Savage, who takes his pen name from there's an old anthropological book, Le Pensée Sauvage, talking about the mind of the savage. That's where he got his pen name from. But to me, he is the quintessential conservative of at least the early 2000s. I've read tons of his books, and of course, his big mantra is borders, language, culture. So like, what's the constitution of a conservative government? Like what is that? Because like like you're saying, you can't push morality on people. You don't want the morality police, because that's not conservatism. So in his mind, those are the three main functions that a government would need: is borders, language, and culture. And he says, within that, there's plenty of room to still be a libertarian. And that's because you're making the distinction. You're saying that, hey, conservatives and libertarians are different. There's a lot of conservatives that are actually libertarians, because there's a difference in how you run your house and how you think your country should be run. And that's, so that's, you'll find that a lot in the libertarian circles, is that, they align with the Libertarian Party because like they don't want the morality police. And, once you really take a deep dive into that, you don't want them to be the anything police, because they're not good at it.
Yeah, and in all, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, and that's the distinction, because like how I run my house is way different from how I run my government, or how I want my government run. If I were to have my own little city, where I would run things, it would be run differently than I run my house, because I understand it's a bigger melting pot of mentalities and behaviors and cultures and all that kind of thing. And there's not a one size fits all for how to make people get along. It's one of those where you just got to figure it out, and you got to be there to, enforce basic rights, property rights, individual rights, things like that. So you step in for that, but like, beyond that, it's, we just got to figure it out. And that's the problem. Like the modern day conservative. And I think Rush Limbaugh used to make fun of these guys. He called them the red meat Republicans, right? The conservatives that really hate the environment and just stay at home all day and eat red meat and smoke cigars. It's just, there's a certain point, like Zane's saying, where you can't sit on the sidelines with this stuff. And it's tough, because being, a libertarian, or even, a staunch conservative, that's all you want to do, is just stay home, take care of your family, be left alone, that kind of thing. But, like you're saying, the socialists, the Democrats, like, they are driven by power. They have to go accumulate it. And if you're sitting at home on your hands, they're gaining ground. So where's the balance there?
Well, I would say two things. One is, I do agree, it may be apocryphal, the quote attributed to Edmund Burke, that all that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. I don't like that quote, because he said a lot of other better quotes and nobody knows about them. But there is a sense in which, yes, we have to have an active role and it is true, there were those who attempt to accumulate power. Let's presume that a good many of them are doing so in good faith and doing so for the right, I shouldn't say the right reasons. I think a lot of people behave in manners that they've convinced themselves is moral, justifiable in some ways. I think a lot of the left is motivated by an idea of justice. Now, it may be misconstrued, it might be wrong, and it may be very dangerous, but they're not doing evil for evil's sake. There are exceptions, but most of them are not. that still means we need to make an active, concerted effort to try to thwart their desires, say, to concert themselves over us. But I want to hasten to add one other thing, which is I do think one of the things we're suffering from in this present moment is this sort of notion that somehow you being a good and decent husband and father and citizen, someone who is willing to engage in good faith, good spirited debates, or, that somehow that's insufficient. And maybe in totality it is, but I dare say, I think that's actually far more important than the active attempt to check the left. I think if we ever saw a country in which I'm going to call it, I mean this in a very broad sense, center-right majority Americans. I think the average American has a center-right, let's call it intermoral compass, if you will. They're not conservative, they're not libertarian, but they tend to not want an expansive federal state. I think if we had individuals more behaving with integrity, it would be very difficult for an authoritarian type idea to take control. I think in societies where you see this spin out of control is when you've lost that kind of cohesiveness among a community. Again, I'm not saying we don't have a role to play in trying to fight the left, but I think we ought not to discount that the best thing we can do is not who we vote for or, who we denounce online, if you will, but how we raise our kids and how we conduct our own lives. I think that has... I think the best shock against an authoritarian state is a cohesive state of liberty, because it can't gain a foothold. I mean, just look at Marxism couldn't take hold in this country the same way it could Europe, because Europe had a history of a class structure that we never had here. We had the ability to have sort of a mobility. Sadly, that seems to be changing. It seems like we're instituting an elitist class, and I fear for the future. What does that mean? Does that mean that sort of these radical ideologies can gain a foothold? I don't mean that we need to eliminate the class, but we need to find a way to reinvigorate the mobility so that if you want to ascend, you can. And I think that is something that will be a better bulwark, if you will, against radical leftism than even fighting them directly.
Daggum. Well, this has been our opening conversation. We haven't even gotten to the topic of the evening yet. So before we do that, we did skip over a very vital part of this show, which is, Stephen, what are you drinking tonight, man?
So I actually I was so excited, the winter IPA from Creature Comforts. I found it back at the local store. It's almost out of season. It goes out of season tomorrow officially. So
it's not out of season up here. Look what happened up here today.
Wow.
Isn't that wild? Friggin' snowed 6 inches up here.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, you enjoy your stinking winter piss, and we'll move on to Zane. Zane, what are you drinking, man?
Well, you're actually not going to believe this, but I've got the Sam Adams Winter White Ale.
Oh my God. What? What is this theme that's developing? Josh, please tell me you're not drinking something with winter in the title. What are you drinking?
No, I'm drinking tea. I'm a teetotaler in the sense that I don't consume alcohol, and I drink a ton of tea from my Saving Elephants collector's mug. I get them on Amazon. But I'm drinking a Hardee and Sons Paris. I think it's a decaffeinated Earl Grey. I think it's got bergamot in it. It tastes pretty cool, and then once it's gone, I swear the mug smells like I just smoked a cigar.
Oh,
it's got an amazing aroma to it.
I love the bergamot that's in Earl Grey. Bergamot actually fights cholesterol.
Interesting.
I go to a naturopathic doctor, and he's got me taking like bergamot extract pills at dinner.
Interesting.
Yeah,
did not know that.
Well, I'm drinking the very last of my Ardbeg Wee Beastie in our Liberty Libations Drink and Be Free tumbler. So you can get that on our website. We're not on Amazon, so we're not as fancy as Josh here.
I'm not either. That was a joke. You can get 2 of them from my closet. Those are the last 2 in existence, I think.
There we go. Okay.
Josh, I do respect your teetotalism, but see, I'm both a libertarian and an Anglican, which means I'm contractually obligated to drink at every opportunity.
I understand.
Goodness gracious. All right. So for tonight's show, I gave Josh the option to choose a topic of something that he was interested in, that he wanted to talk about. He chose the lack of, how'd you phrase it? You phrased it a specific way. Congress not
doing its job, I think, might be
owning up to
simple way of
their
it.
prerogatives. One is basically what it was. So I'm gonna show y'all, for those who don't know, what Article 1 is, or what it says. Article 1 of the Constitution, this is from Grok, a summarization, establishes the legislative branch, creating a bicameral Congress consisting of the House and the Senate, and vests all federal legislative powers in it. It details the structure, election, qualifications, and operations of both chambers, outlines how bills become law, and enumerates Congress's specific powers, such as taxing, regulating commerce, declaring war, and coining money, while imposing certain limits on congressional and state authority. This article forms the longest and most detailed portion of the Constitution, reflecting the framers' intent to create a strong but checked legislative body as the first and primary branch of the new national government. Josh, would you add anything to that summary?
I think I would just put the last paragraph and highlight that, since that's kind of the point of what I was bringing this up for. Yeah,
for sure. And then I asked to enumerate some of the things that it actually states, some of the things that Congress actually is supposed to be in charge of.
Declare war? Is that must be that must be Grok?
I think that's misinformation.
Yeah, that's
I think they're asleep at the switch.
It surely doesn't say that.
Yeah, they're 25 years late on that one.
So, if you want, go look it up. If you want to read the whole thing, go look it up. You can look it up on congress.gov, which is where I originally looked it up and read it for today's show, just so I was familiar with it again. So Josh, what's your premise? What's your thoughts on Congress and Article 1?
Yeah, well, let me say first off that this is not unique to me. I'm hearing this from my betters, but it's sort of reinforced, which is that the founders of our country had in mind that Congress would have a more active role than what they currently do. And I think it is well and good that we bemoan the rise of the administrative state, that we denounce the excesses of the executive branch, and maybe to a slightly more limited degree the judicial branch. But I honestly think the actual villain in this story is not presidents that keep taking too much power and a court that keeps inserting themselves where they ought not to. That is true. But I think it is made possible by a Congress who has more and more and more in over the last half century, and especially in recent decades, ceded their authority to these other branches of government. This is a rare, in my view, blind spot in the founders' thinking, which is they had assumed that every branch of government is going to jealously guard their power, and they would form a check against the other branches because they wouldn't let the other branches take over. I don't think they quite envisioned, well, what if some of these congressmen wanted to be social media figures and wanted to just run for president, and that was what was important to them, not actually govern. And so I don't, there are a number of things I think we could do to potentially reverse this. I will say this I'm speaking as someone who is attempting to channel the spirit of James Madison. The point is not that Congress needs to do its job so that it'll get to passing all the legislation I want it to pass. I hope it does. I hope it governs in a conservative manner that I would, find good. But the point is, Congress needs to be functional. This is where we need to be standing. The sadly, tragically, soon to be deceased former Senator Ben Sasse said this during Brett Kavanaugh's hearings. Is talking about the tragedy that so many Americans stand outside the Supreme Court protesting. So they should be outside the Capitol doing this. Why is it 9 unelected individuals are deciding so many things that affect our lives? Why not put it in control of the people who we can fire if they make a mistake, make more directly responsible? And so I think that is I think step one is a reinvigorated Congress may not pass the laws we want them to, but it at least gives us, we the people, the opportunity to direct Congress in a manner. I can't easily fire the president or the judiciary branch or the administrative state, but I do have a greater impact on Congress. If they would do their job, I think the American people would have a more powerful representative in the national government.
Yeah, man. I definitely agree with part of what you're saying. My wife and I were just talking about this the other day. With I'm working on a case up here for one of our other shows where basically the sheriff is leaning on a judicial decision from the Supreme Court rather than the Constitution of Montana or the Constitution of the United States, and that's all he has. He has nothing else to back, and he's actually never quoted the actual ruling. He just says, no, we're allowed to, but he doesn't know why, because he's not a good sheriff. And so their only defense is that judicial decision, not the Montana Code annotated, Montana Constitution, and the United States Constitution. And it has cost dozens, if not hundreds, maybe even thousands of Montanans their lives up here in Montana. So it's I definitely do not like to see laws passed by the non-legislative branch, or laws passed by the non-legislative branch, and it's been a very frustrating experience trying to correct some of that up here. Yeah, Zane, you got something?
Yeah, I think this is like just another application of public choice economics, where it's like trying to model the behavior of government institutions using the same kind of analysis of incentives that you would trying to analyze the behavior of anyone else. So, like, for example, of the behavior of a bureaucracy, the people in charge will always take action to try to increase their sphere of influence, increase the number of different functions that their department performs, increase the number of people that they employ, because it always enhances their own power. When you think about what are the incentives of senators and representatives, I mean, they obviously have a staff, but they're not going to be in charge of a large bureaucracy. So their incentive is to just remain in office for as long as possible. So if you look at like re-election rates of representatives, they're like 95% of the time these people are getting reelected. And the reason is they're all wet paper bags that try on purpose to do as little as possible. And so if you abdicate all of your own power to the president or the bureaucracy, then when it comes time to run for reelection, no one can really say anything bad about you because you actually have not done anything. So like, and I think that undeclared war is the perfect example of this. And we may get into the particular Iran war later, or just the terror wars in general. I would imagine we probably don't see exactly eye to eye on the terror war project, but I think they're all very stupid. But the big problem is like, if Congress actually had to declare the war, we probably wouldn't be in as many of them as we are, because actually standing up and voting in favor of war is a difficult thing to do. Like, I think the even when we were going to, like, they were having a vote on World War I, lots of people voted against it. But even the people that voted for it, they kind of got pressured into it. They thought that they might look cowardly if they voted against it. It's speculated that if it had been a secret ballot instead of a public ballot, we might have actually not declared war on Germany and not entered World War I. But maybe that's just besides the point. My point in bringing this up is that declaring, like, passing any bill is really difficult, because it has to go through committee. Well, first it has to go through the rules committee, and it could die there. And then it has to go to its actual committee, and then it might die there. And then it has to go to a vote. And there are a million reasons why it might not pass. So if you actually had to do that to declare war, and it's not like everyone getting swept up in it like either of the world wars, where it at the time it would have been popular. But it in fact was popular to declare those wars. So like maybe Afghanistan, possibly the Congress would have actually declared war. But it's like, do you think that Congress would have bothered declaring war on Somalia or Libya or Pakistan if they had actually had to do all of the work of declaring the war? Probably not, because it would have just drawn attention to the fact that we were at war in all these places and we were blowing up a bunch of civilians and not accomplishing anything in a way that would have been unpopular. So they would have rather just let the president do whatever he wanted. And then if a Thomas Massey or another like spunky congressman tries to bring like a vote on an authorization of use of military force to try to like get the president to stop, now the burden of all that work is on trying to pass the thing that would make the president stop, rather than being on the thing that would allow them to start the war in the first place. So it's kind of the reverse of what it should be, where it's supposed to be hard to declare the war. Now it's hard to stop an undeclared war. So it's and like if a war is unpopular as well, like it's a lot easier to shake off, well, why didn't you let this vote against the war get out of committee? And someone can be like, oh, well, procedural, blah, blah, blah. How did you even find out about that? But in a way that if a congressman stood up and voted in favor of an unpopular war, that might cost them their seat in the next election.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as going to war against Somalia, we don't know what that Toby Keith song sounds like. So, it might be a banger. I might get on board with it.
So, Josh, one of my questions is, you said it was one of the few flaws that the founding fathers didn't see this coming. It's one of the few things that you think they missed. What is it? Because there's no way that it didn't just start happening because of the social media age and because people want to be stars on Instagram and the internet and everything. So what is your theory or thought on why it started happening? Or is this just like a human nature thing where this was definitely going to happen? They just overlooked it.
It's probably a little of all of the above, right? I mean, I don't think this is true, but I have a good friend who basically has this theory that where we screwed up as a nation was when we installed central heating and air in the United States Capitol, because Washington D.C., and the founders had no way of envisioning that. It's a cesspool, it's a swamp, right? Who wants to be there in the summer months? Well, darn it, when we got that thing working, like there's no you can be a professional politician. I think there's a lot of people who observed, I guess, that through the 1970s, D.C. was not a cool place just to hang out in, but now it's one of the largest metropolitan areas in the United States. You can really be, if you aspire to be someone, being in D.C. and being in kind of the cream of the crop is, you made it in life, kind of. So I do think there's some of that going on. I also think, and by the way, I didn't get a chance to look at too many prior episodes, but I did appreciate that you did a call out that I guess Woodrow Wilson is a recurring enemy on the show. Let's blame him for some of this. He didn't do it alone, but he opened the Pandora's box. I think once you have an aggressive executive and an expanding administrative state, I think this does become a little bit more inevitable. Even though I do think Congress ought to have, and we saw, even at post-Wilson, post-FDR, there was still up through the 60s an aggressive Congress that could slap a president down pretty easily. Heck, at one point in the 70s, we almost impeached and removed one from office. And I don't know that that'll ever happen unless the opposition party is the one in power. But I think that it's probably a little all of the above. I think they may have, I don't think if you go far enough back, you could become the sort of celebrity and enjoy the kind of life you can today as a member of the House or Senate that maybe you could have in the past. I'm trying to be cautious to give a little bit of a pass to the founders. They got some things wrong, and this was maybe one of them. But it's a pretty good run. 250 years it's been ongoing, and it's a heck of a lot better than France did. In almost any other republic that they tried. So I'm not so much down on the founders. I guess I'm just saying that they constructed a system that was meant to check itself. And there's an area that we Americans, I think, now have the duty to try to figure out, okay, it's not working as originally designed. What do we do about that to hopefully reinvigorate those checks against each other?
Well, Grumpy had it right. Any law repugnant to the Constitution can and should be ignored. So, thank God here in Georgia, we have, sheriffs, many sheriffs that, if gun confiscation orders ever came down, they've already signed pledges saying that they will not only not comply, but they will lead the militia against such a thing. So
I like that.
That's how it starts right there, on the local level. And Josh, hopefully you agree with me on this. I mean, we were originally founded where 90% of our governance should come from the local level. Now, most of our taxes go to the federal level these days. And it's real easy to get locked into, if you spend too much time on the radio during traffic or, watch too much TV when you get home, it's real easy to think that these creeps that live thousands of miles away from you have total control over your life. When, in all honesty, the zoning board that can come write you a ticket for having grass too high in your backyard, those are the ones that are really controlling your life when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
So where does the control begin? Like, that's where, so we talked about, the power, like in society, the power of the individual and then building up from that. I mean, that's how the government should be, from the local and then build up from that. But then we as a collective overturn local governments. And that's, you got to get active. You got to participate. And it's real easy to just want to, go to work and go home and be left alone. But I mean, honestly, with the proliferation of data centers, I mean, down here in the Southeast and especially in Georgia, I mean, Georgia, now that half of it's on fire too, just watch how many data centers get built. It's crazy. I think we're one of the top 5 in the country for the number of data center construction sites. It's becoming such a hot button issue for people. And of course, we're all scared that, they're going to be burning up all of our water. And as far as I can tell, there's only really a handful that are trying to use all the water. The closed loop systems, that's a side issue. But anyways, I think that's how you push back on this, is that, you do have to participate on the local level. And that's where the difference comes from. It's, when these unconstitutional orders come in, when these stupid laws come in, you're going to have local jurisdictions come back and say, you know what? I'm not doing that. I mean, like marijuana, I just look at Denver, they're like, hey, federal government, you say it's illegal. We're growing it, man. We're taxing it. We're doing this thing. Come get it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I know, like, that's a moral issue for some people, but like, that's one of the examples of a state and a local government standing up against federal overreach, saying, you're not going to tell me how to live my life. I'm going to do this. And not only that, but I'm going to get taxes from it and make people's lives better because of it.
This is why I love hanging out with libertarians, because it feels like you go to that family reunion. It's like, oh, I forgot I was related to that cousin. It's like there's a lot of overlap here, but really, are we really related? And so there's so much you're saying I agree with, and then someone's like, so let me put it this way. I think you and I have a lot in common in the sense that we would strongly desire a reinvigoration of local control. Yes. I want a United States that's more diverse, honestly, that Oklahoma, where I'm from, is different than Georgia, where you're from. I mean, why not? Wouldn't that be a better world to live in, where, I don't know what's going on in Georgia. What businesses of mine? But I think that where I become a little bit more skittish, if you will, is when we talk about the mechanisms for getting there. I don't want a system in which we ultimately see the federal government as being a big joke. It is in a certain regard, but I don't want to. We'll take the marijuana for example, and we probably don't agree on the marijuana issue, but let's just assume for the sake of conversation we do. I would much prefer a system in which we work with the federal government to scale down power to local levels, and then those local levels make decisions about marijuana laws, rather than the law's still on the book, but we're just ignoring it. Because at some point, if you keep getting to the laws on the book and we just keep ignoring it or we're overriding it, I think that's a very dangerous recipe. Now, maybe some of that is necessary. And yes, there are times when the federal government oversteps to such a degree. Maybe as a patriotic American, that's the only thing you can do. But I think a safer, dare I say, more ordered and more conducive to liberty type society is one in which the federal government is out of pressure from local governments and its citizens, essentially ceding power back to local levels, rather than we're just taking it for ourselves. Maybe there's a bit of both of that has to happen. I'm a little cautious about local uprisings can go awry sometimes.
Oh, I can see the slippery slope argument exactly, because what happens when the state or the local government stands up against something that you believe in? Like, hey, not only is abortion great, but we're going to subsidize it with property taxes. Whoa, Now all of a sudden I'm upset.
I think there's also I think it also needs to be said, part of the problem is here we need to be cautious that local governments aren't always conducive to liberty. And sometimes what local governments want to do, I mean, heck, go back to the slavery issue. Like, it's certainly not Black Americans' liberty that local governments was in favor of. And I'm not trying to open the can of worms of should the federal government have been involved in that or shouldn't they have. I guess I'm just saying it's not. Generally speaking, local government should have more control. There is no guarantee that they're an actual secure of our liberties, though.
Yeah,
correct. And I think. Go ahead, Zane.
What makes it more likely that they will, though, is that it's easier for me to move one town over than one state over, or to a different country in that order. So, and we saw this. You saw this in like medieval Europe, where like every city was, I mean, there were like lots of overlapping jurisdictions and empires and kingdoms and stuff, but to a large extent, most of the governing was being done at the level of the city. And so if you were like a peasant and your local duke was oppressing you, then you could pack up and go 5 miles down the road to a different duke who would then be like competing. So like you had all these like minor dukedoms and duchies that were like competing with each other to have the system of government that was most amenable to liberty. I think it, as you were saying earlier, you would kind of wish that the U.S. was more diverse, in which, like, in the sense that localities had cultures that were more different from each other.
Yeah.
And I would agree, and I would actually say the homogenization of American culture, I think, has led to people being more okay with the total state. Because it's like, well, if I'm a Californian, but I think that, well, I'm really exactly the same as someone who lives in Georgia. So therefore, there is actually no reason why I shouldn't be able to exercise jurisdiction over you. Whereas if Californians and Georgians had more of a sense of, actually, this is a somewhat different society, we should let them do their own thing to a large extent. And you could say a lot about how maybe like even things like TV and streaming and that kind of all, I mean, long before you get to streaming, but just over the past 100 years, there have been lots of things that have led to the making a U.S. culture that has become more and more of the same and has kind of bulldozed over any authentic differences that might engender the kind of local spirit that you would need for people to take local government seriously. And I'll also say that it doesn't help that representatives and senators at the U.S. level are really representatives of nothing, because the average U.S. representative has 800,000 people in their district. You cannot possibly have any meaningful accountability to 800,000 people. I mean, and I think right after the Constitution was enacted, the average representative represented 13,000 people, which is a much more tractable number of people. Yeah. And like, I know that you can't like have a Congress of 8,000 people because that presents its own practical difficulties. But I mean, maybe you could. It's worth a shot, I guess. But like that, and this is why you originally had senators elected by the state governments rather than by every single person in the state. Because if you're elected by the state government, then you actually can be a good representative of the body of 200 people who elected you. Like, the original understanding of the senators was that they represented the states, not that they represented the people, because representing an entire state's worth of people is a silly idea. You can't possibly do it. So again, the more local the power is, the more likely you are to be able to say, hey, Joe, I personally know you and you're stupid.
So a friend of mine, Jeff Mayhew, he's president of the No Cap Fund. He actually would be, I think, a pretty excellent guest for this show. I tease him that the No Cap Fund is essentially he's the leader of the effort to remove the cap on the 435 members of the House of Representatives. Essentially, the argument you're making, hey, we need more representatives so that it's easier to have connection with this guy and actually know him. I joke that he sounds to me oftentimes like that politician during the debate that no matter what question he's asked, he finds some way to bring it back to his budget or his plan, because it's almost no matter what question, no matter what the political problem is, it all comes back to that we need to expand the House. I'm not quite there with him, but I am very much with him that we need to expand the dang House. I do think that's, if we're looking for like what are the top 5 things that could possibly forgive me, I'm not trying to put words in you guys' mouth that we're all on the same page that we want a more active Congress. But if you're like me and you want a Congress that's trying to take its authority back from the executive and judicial powers, I do think expanding the House would be helpful, because I think it would do 2 things. One, and often as the left is more concerned about this, it would be harder to gerrymander this country if you were doing it with 8,000 districts instead of 435. It'd also be a lot harder to wrangle them all under just, say, one central leadership that turns to the president and says, whatever you want, sir, that's what we're going to pass. And I think you would see a diversity of views. And that's, and I say that someone, I might like the president and like what he's doing, but I think the House of Representatives is supposed to represent us, we the people. I'm not a strong small d Democrat. I don't want the Senate and the president and everybody else to be like some sort of super majority direct election, but I do want the House to be that. I want the House to be the closest reflection to what the impulse of the populace really is in any given 2-year period. And I think the only way you get there is to expand it outward so that people are actually, reflecting the communities they're from. You had mentioned this, Zane. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? When I tell someone that, if they are familiar with the city of Tulsa, they assume I mean the city of Tulsa. It just so happens I actually live in the city of Broken Arrow. I live in Tulsa.
I was just about to ask that.
Yeah.
I actually have some old friends who live in Broken Arrow.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, yeah. We'll have to talk here in a bit, but where I was going with that is the reason people assume I mean the city is because the city we recognize as something that has roots. It has a history. It has things that an Oklahoman growing up there can identify and fill in their bones in some sense. And I can defend it. It's ours in some way. It's unique. It's diverse. It's different than where you're from in Georgia or Montana or Zane, forgive me, wherever you're, presumably somewhere in the continental United States. I think that the county is an arbitrary boundary that a group of politicians drew up one day. And it's not that you can't have some pride in that, but I think you necessarily need something that's sort of this is ours, this is mine. It's kind of a Burkean idea, right? You start with the family, you start with the community, and from that, you get affection. From that, you get the desire to defend these things, and that's how you can build a nation, is with those sort of things. And when you take it away, when we're all just individuals, the only thing left, after you've stripped all the intermediary institutions, is just the central state.
Interesting.
I completely agree. And it's like, I recently was able to buy a condo in the city that I had been renting in for a couple of years before that. And just immediately after that happened, I felt just such a closer connection to the future of the city that I live in. Because obviously when you rent, you can just pack up and leave whenever you want. Property values be damned. Where it's like now, it's like I'm actually really attached to this place. For practical reasons, I need to care about how my neighbors are doing, which I think is a really good impulse, and why it's such a problem that nobody can actually afford to buy property anymore. Because when everyone is a rentoid that feels no obligation to their community whatsoever, then you end up in a very not conservative society.
Yeah.
Why do they get to vote? They don't own property.
I know, right?
Yeah, no. I agree.
Quick thing on nullification also is I will just point out that nullification does have a really robust history going back pretty much to the founders. So I'll just throw that out there.
Okay. Well, I'll yeah. I thought we figured that one out after the Civil War, but maybe that's a can of worms we want to open.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because pre-Civil War, one of the most common uses of nullification was to nullify the Fugitive Slave Act. So it cuts both
I did not know that.
There you go.
I did not know that.
Well, see, and I agree with it mainly on the premise of like the executive portion of it saying, hey, this rule you've put in place is unenforceable. the cost of administration for this thing that I'll have to oversee this and track this and enforce it makes it, untenable. I'm not going to do that. Like, for instance, so I'm a land surveyor, so I know this, but like, in Tennessee, there's like a third of their counties opted out of the zoning code. So, the state had the zoning code, but if you're going to opt into that, you're going to have, a building department, a GIS department. You got to have GIS technicians. You got to have certain levels of mapping. The mapping has to be to certain standards. And each municipality that was going to subscribe to this, it was going to cost them like $75,000. And some of these municipalities, in rural Tennessee, just outside the mountains, that's their entire annual budget just to create this new department. And then they have to enforce it. And then it's an annual, it's going to start growing from there and growing from there. And they're like, you know what? Never mind. We've got a fire marshal that knows the building code. He's going to check things out. We're not doing this crap. So like, that's another example that maybe, is less controversial than the marijuana standard of, from an executive level saying, hey, we're not following this. It's too costly. We can't do it. So, and that's one of the things that, Congress today doesn't really take into account is like, hey, the tracking, the enforcing, the administrative cost, all the paperwork this is going to create, is it even worth it? And that's, a lot of these things need to come with sunset clauses where they just automatically expire. So that way you don't have to, take up valuable debate time 10 years from now trying to repeal something that should have expired. That there needs to be some kind of standard to review these things and like, hey, in 5 years, if it's not meeting these metrics, if it's not actually producing the results that it intended, it goes away, something like that. And so then that way, this administrative burden, which I think is, a lot of the reason for dismantling things from the local level, the stuff could just be automatic. And that could be one way we'd be more effective too, without having to, quadruple or more the size of the house.
Yeah. Josh, going back to, so I'd asked you earlier, like what your thought, like why you think it happened, and was it just an oversight of the founders and everything? One thing that I always come back to, and these two guys are probably tired of hearing of it at this point, but I pretty much always take most of the problems that we're having in today's society and take it back to the creation of the Federal Reserve. And I will continue to do that until someone proves that that is not the case, which no one has been able to adequately convince me or give me actually any real data saying that the Federal Reserve has been good for the United States. And so what I think happens is when you create a machine that can then print money at will, that can debase everybody's labor, that can give money and power to those who already have power, being congressmen taking bribes, printing money for their own committees, printing money for their own departments in the government, the revolving door, all of that. When you create a system where money is ultimately meaningless in the end and is continuously devalued over 120 years, I think that is a massive reason why this path was the one that was traveled down. I think that I mean, I go back to the Bible a lot. So like the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And I think when you have an unlimited supply of money, you're going to have an unlimited supply of evil. And so I think those two things go hand in hand. And that's one of the reasons, one of the bigger reasons, in my opinion, as to why we are where we are today. Yeah. I don't know. Zane had some funny faces during that, but
I mean, I want to hear what Josh has to say about that.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, what's going through my head is I feel like I'm occasionally I'll show up on a leftist podcast as sort of the token conservative.
Yeah.
And I hate this as like, please stop putting me in a position where I'm having to defend Donald Trump. You know, can we not just all, you know, and it's like, I don't want to defend the Federal Reserve, but I'm not with you, if you will. Like there's if the point is the Federal Reserve has screwed a lot of things up, sure, yeah, absolutely, I don't disagree. I don't share the origin idea that it's maybe has been on nothing but a net negative for the United States. Let me put it this way: I am sympathetic to the general idea. Let's just take the U.S. out of it. I'm sympathetic to the general idea that a nation state has good reason to put its monetary policy outside the reach of any sort of elected representative. Because I think it has been demonstrated throughout history that elected representatives also cannot be trusted. Now, maybe part of the problem we're bumping into here is, you mentioned the Bible as original sin. Humans cannot be trusted. So what is our entire system is built on this notion that we really can't know. Men are not angels, as Madison wisely observed. And so I'm not offering to you I don't have in mind an alternative, let's say, that would solve all problems. Now, I'm open to the idea that there could be better ways of doing it. Maybe this betrays my sort of monetarist. I don't necessarily want to say, I won't equate too many names because I'm not an economist, so I'm not trying to implicate other people. I would strongly desire a Federal Reserve that was far more rules-based, that had less power to tinker with things and was simply there to measure certain metrics and say, in these certain circumstances, here's what we do. And the reason I say that is because I think one of the things that can be helpful with is a sort of predictability with the economy of, well, here's what we can all reasonably expect the Reserve to do under these certain circumstances, rather than we're just going to open the coffers in the piggy bank because it's politically helpful to do so. All this being said, so I don't know, man. Maybe Zane should. I know we want to do trivia at some point, and this is a whole other thing. But so I guess just maybe
we're all good.
yeah. So I guess I'll just maybe to summarize there. I'm with you that the Federal Reserve has created a lot of ills in their society. I don't know that I would go as far as you do, and pointing to the manner in which. And let me rephrase that. I think there were good reasons it was put in place in the first place. Maybe it's not justifiable enough to justify its existence, but I certainly am not as down on it as you have expressed.
Interesting. I'd be interested to hear what you think the good reasons are it was put into place to begin with.
I think it was essentially that I was saying earlier that legislators had recognized that giving them the power, and I would say a very similar thing of, say, I'm afraid we're going to learn this lesson again. I would say the same thing of trade. One of the reasons that Congress wanted to give trade powers away is it couldn't be trusted with them. I don't think the president can either, incidentally. But I think that I think corruption had existed to such a degree that it was easy for Congress to essentially create growth where it was artificial. And so they felt that creating an additional layer of insulation outside of just a directly elected body of congressmen would perhaps provide the incentive, let's say. Let me put it this way, sort of like the Supreme Court, because they have lifetime appointments. And I know Federal Reserve Board does not. But because they have lifetime appointments, they have the capacity to have a little bit more historical knowledge and to do things that in the moment are maybe very politically unpopular, but might, in theory, be the right thing to do. Obviously, they can do the wrong things that are also politically unpopular. And I think that was the idea, is that we could take the political pressure away from the Federal Reserve. I'm not, again, trying to argue that things have not gone terribly awry. I'm trying to say that to me is an understandable, justifiable argument for why it was built the way it was in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, so this seems
now, if we want to talk about modern monetary theory, if we want to talk about
Zane's about to launch into it.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, now you just tempted me with MMT, so maybe we'll have to talk about that next. But
yeah,
I'm obviously sympathetic to not trusting Congress with monetary policy, but I don't think that those are the only two options. I think that we could just not have monetary policy like we didn't have it for the first century of America's existence. Like, as I'm sure you know, the Constitution defines what a dollar is as a certain weight of gold and silver. So, and this literally used to be the case where you could just show up to the mint with the right amount of gold or silver and, minus the processing fee, they would turn your gold or silver into a dollar. And that's just what a dollar was. And so congressmen or bureaucrats were never asked how many dollars should we create this quarter, because that was just not in the realm of their power, because they didn't make the money. Gold literally was the money. And so nobody was able to monkey around with the money supply or interest rates or anything like that. And the origin of like the Federal Reserve is, before we had the Fed, we had a series of like systems of national banks, which definitely like to inflate the money supply as much as they could, which was bad and caused panics and stuff. Although the panics were never as bad as the recessions that we have today. And so what some powerful bankers did, it was essentially like the Rockefellers and the Morgans, ginned up a bunch of like fake grassroots support. Like they essentially astroturfed a bunch of bankers and businessmen to create societies that were like, these national banks can't be trusted. We need more stability in our monetary policy. So they got this like pretend public pressure, and then in a secret meeting, they all got a bunch of powerful bankers together to draft up the Federal Reserve, and then it got passed under Woodrow Wilson. And what the Federal Reserve has done in its century of existence is make all of the problems that we had under the national banks, and that all of the people were supposedly complaining about why we need to have a Fed, all those problems got even worse. Like the Great Depression obviously happened while we had the Fed, not while we didn't have it. The Great Recession happened while we had the Fed. The dot-com bubble happened while we had the Fed. So I would say whatever good faith arguments might be made about how if you separate the bureaucrats from electoral pressure and then they'll make better decisions about money supply and interest rates, empirically that has just not been what happened.
I will confess I am ill-equipped to go hammer and tongs on any of you in a federal discussion, and this is something that and I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I'm coming to a battle of wits very unarmed, if you will. This is something that libertarians, for obvious reasons, are very animated by. There are things that progressives are very animated. When I go on my friends' progressive shows, like I gotta read up on race, critical race theory and stuff. That's something that's interesting to them, because
feelings and emotions.
Exactly. And so I'm not saying it's not a good point you're making. It's just I am concerned I may not be the best representative for the alternative view, if you will.
Dude, that's totally fair, man. Like this is one of my primary talking points. So like, it's not going to be for everybody. You came in with your talking point, which you wanted to, like your topic, which you wanted to talk about, and we've strayed a little bit from that.
Yeah.
Whenever you talk about the Fed, right, you're going to be playing on a libertarian's home turf. So we do recognize that. But why at least I get so animated about it is because I think the consequences of the Fed are deeply cultural. Like, why do you think people can't buy a house and like can't become attached to their community? It's because the Fed keeps debasing their currency. Why are people under the impression that they can't afford to have kids and start a family? Why are people under the impression that they can't afford to like buy food from their local grocery store and they have to go to the megacorp food provider? It's because, and obviously compared to most periods of human history, we do have an extravagant standard of living, but at least the impression that people get when their money buys less and less every year is that I'm poorer than I was. And because of that, I can't afford to do all the things that people have historically done to create a society that people want to live in.
Yeah. I think there's a sense in which you and I might see two sides of the same coin. And I'm not saying the Fed hasn't contributed to that, but if you're asking questions like, why can't we afford housing? Why do we have these? I think because we have this insatiable appetite for debt and funding the entitlement system. Now, maybe, in absence of the Fed, maybe that wouldn't have been possible. I do think there are other contributing factors, say, to housing price. That's a complicated one. Housing and college debt are two areas where I think there are other complicating factors. And these are my betters. This is not just my ideas. There are other ways in which I think those are exploding, but that might completely veer us off of the conversation we're having tonight.
Yeah, I think it.
I will say, just as a quick aside,
Yeah.
I will agree. Milton Friedman, I believe, adequately demonstrated the Federal Reserve is probably the largest culprit in the Great Depression. So just to reiterate, I'm not here to defend the Fed. I'm simply saying I may not share all of your presuppositions about them.
That is very fair. We're going to take a pause from the discussion, and we're going to play some trivia, y'all.
Let's do it.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Libation Nation Trivia. Zane is your host for the evening. It is not me. So I'm going to let him take it away for now. I really, really got caught up in that. I was about to start hosting trivia, and it's not even my dadgum time to host. So my bad, Zane. Let's go. Embarrass me per usual. Let's do it.
It's really my fault. I've taken too many weeks off, and you've gotten too comfortable in your host seat.
Yes, I have.
All right. Welcome to another week of Libations Trivia. As usual, we have trivia in 3 rounds. Round 1 is 8 questions, 1 point each. Round 2 is 6 questions, 2 points each. And round 3 is 4 questions, 3 points each. If you are in the audience, please leave a comment with your answer, and I will take the first one that's not obviously a joke. Our contestants here will write their answer on a piece of paper or a whiteboard.
Yeah, we have to specify that because half our audience just guesses dumb crap.
Tonight's categories. Round 1, movie haikus.
Let's go.
Round 2, bridge and power plant day. And round 3, straights.
All right.
All right, round 1, movie haikus. And this category was inspired by a category that Jake had sometime last year on a show that I wasn't on. That's why Jake was hosting. But he had like a category of like really artsy, fartsy, incomprehensible summaries of movies.
They were great summaries of movies.
They were not great.
Yes, they were.
But I thought I would give it a go to summarize movies in poetic form. So here we go.
Let's do
it. Question 1. Things do not go well in post-war Atlanta for Scarlett O'Hara. Whenever I write a movie category, it's always on a week that Alden isn't around.
It's hilarious. All right, go for it, Zane.
All right, Josh.
I've got a big whiteboard here. Hopefully it'll.
Wow.
Let's go.
In there.
Yeah.
Jake.
We're going to go with Gone with the Wind.
Steven.
Gone with the Wind.
Audience also has it. It is Gone with the Wind.
And Zane, general rule of thumb, you call on our guest last in case they're still writing. So call on Steven or me first.
All right. I typically go in left to right order, but I can
know
go
your
in
brain
right
can barely handle going right to left. So, but you're going to have to suck it up.
Well, actually, usually the guest is all the way to the right.
I don't know what to tell you. Next question.
All right. Question 2. T.S. Eliot was utterly besmirched by this film's butthole cut.
What on earth?
I'll explain this question after I reveal the answer.
Oh, man, I'm blanking out. Let's see.
I have no friggin' clue. I know this isn't correct, but I'm writing it down anyway.
All right. Steven.
Beavis and Butthead Do America.
Jake.
It said Midnight in Paris.
Josh.
I know this is not correct, but Cats, because I heard they added the buttholes to the. I know Elliot was not alive at the time, but it was the only butthole movie I could think of.
Oh, please let that be it.
It is the movie that caused the COVID pandemic, Cats.
No way!
What does that have to do with Elliot?
Okay, so the movie Cats was obviously based on the Andrew Lloyd Webber play Cats, but Webber's play was based on Old Possum's book of Practical Cats, which was a little book of random poetry that T.S. Eliot wrote for his 8-year-old nephew. It was never supposed to see the light of day. It was just a little stupid thing that he wrote for a literal child. But then they decided that it was actually a great work of literature and should be turned into a stupid play and then a really stupid movie that has cats that they originally animated to have buttholes, and then they had to take them out.
How did I get that? I actually have that book, by the way, and it is stupid. And I love T.S. Eliot, but that was not one of his great. That's not up there with The Wasteland.
Oh, well, if Jake ever gets around to editing my little piece of bonus content, there is a piece of bonus content coming to Liberty Libations viewers of me reading The Hollow Men and then reading an essay that I wrote about it. So
Yeah.
now that I publicly announced its existence, Jake has to put it out.
I would, except the file's corrupted. So we'll see. Go ahead, Zane.
Question 3. DiCaprio stars in this half-modern Shakespeare with a gun named Sword.
Half-modern Shakespeare.
Oh yeah.
Dadgummit. What's the name of that dadgum movie?
Steven?
Is it Romeo and Juliet?
Jake?
I can't remember the name of the dadgum movie. Pass.
Josh?
This is a complete stab in the dark. Wolf of Wall Street.
Audience also has it, and Steven gets some bonus points in spirit for getting the typography right. It is Romeo plus Juliet.
Yes. I remember the movie poster, actually. Yeah.
So the idea behind this adaptation was it's set in a modern American city, but they did not change any of the dialogue.
Hilarious.
So all the dialogue is still Shakespearean, but it's very strange.
Never saw it.
Oh, it was great.
Nice.
Never heard of it.
It's very young DiCaprio.
Question 4. Emmett Brickowski defeats President Business and stops the Craggle.
This has got to be an animated movie, and so therefore I will not get it. Because that's an absurd description.
In retrospect, probably actually one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, here we go. This solidifies it right here.
Go ahead, Zane.
Steven?
Captain Underpants.
Jake?
Said the Lego movie.
Josh?
I just went for one of my favorite movies, The Big Lebowski.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
The audience says Fraggle Rock. But with a name like Brickowski, it can only be the Lego movie.
no way! How about that?
Wow.
That was a shot in the dark. Gosh, feeling good.
Question 5. Macaulay Culkin stars with Joe Pesci, Dan Stern, and Donald J. Trump.
So I'm guessing these are not going in order of difficulty.
No, they're all over the place.
Go ahead. Thanks.
Steven?
Home Alone, is it 2? It's one of the Home Alones.
Home Alone 2.
Yeah. Home Alone 2.
Josh? It is Home Alone 2, Lost in New York.
There we go.
Question 6. Can global warming result in a new ice age? Apparently so.
I love this movie.
Steven?
The day after tomorrow.
Nick?
Day
Jake?
after tomorrow.
Josh?
Same thing, day after tomorrow.
Heck yeah.
Yep. Awesome, but also ridiculous. Have any of you seen Moonfall?
No.
No.
It's the,
Yeah, is
it's
that the one where the
same
moon's
director.
crashing into the earth?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
I
the
could not
same
finish it.
director.
Okay.
It makes
I
about
didn't say Ice
when
Age
they
on that one.
when they got by the time they get to the moon. That's Halle Berry, isn't it? And
It's Halle, yeah. I forget who else is
Halle
in it.
Berry,
But
and anyhow, by the time they get to the moon, they find out that the moon is hollow and there's some sort of life form. I was like, I'm done. they jumped too many sharks in that movie.
Oh, that's great.
Sorry, spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think any of us were going to watch it. You're good.
Now I'm definitely going to.
Move along, Zane.
Question 7. Per MJ's agent, he only acts as himself. Hence this half cartoon. Steven?
Space Jam.
Jake?
Space Jam.
Josh?
Yeah, I probably got that wrong. Spectre Gadget.
Ooh. It is a half cartoon, though.
Yeah.
It is Space Jam.
Space Jam. Okay.
And now I'm going to hear Quad City DJs in my head all night.
Yeah.
Oh, audience says, hee hee, the movie. And then says, oh, wrong MJ.
That's good.
Question 8. Top Gun, but with cars. Cruise plays racer Cole Trickle. Gets the girl, of course.
Oh, yeah. For some reason, I immediately went to Cars.
Chapow.
You can start with me, Zane.
All right, Jake.
Days of Thunder.
Yes.
Steven.
I knew it had thunder in it, and I couldn't figure out how to. So it is Days of Thunder, is what I finally wrote. Yeah.
Josh.
I know so little about the movie. I couldn't remember if Tom Cruise was in it, but Too Fast, Too Furious.
I love that guess.
Obviously not.
That's my favorite.
Have you
I
guys
talked
seen
about
that? There's an Onion video of they're introducing the guy that wrote the Too Fast, Too Furious movies, and he's a 7-year-old. So what's going to happen in this next movie? They're going to drive real fast.
That's awesome.
All right, I got
What?
to look that one up.
What I love about this movie poster is that Cruise's name is like way bigger than the name of the actual movie itself.
Yeah,
Because that's the important part.
that's what puts the butts in the seats.
All right. At the end of round 1, we've got audience with 3, Josh with 4, Jake and Steven tied with 6.
Hey, audience losing. I like that. It's normally just us trying to beat the audience, Josh. So if you beat the
Okay.
audience, you're doing great.
Awesome.
All right. Round 2, bridge and power plant
Oh
day.
boy.
Yay. The best day ever. Just ask
All wrapped
anybody.
up in one. Question 1. March 19th, 1932. The bridge pictured here opens, connecting Dawes Point and Milson's Point across the harbor in what city? And I will say that any audio listeners are at somewhat of a disadvantage here. So you may want to pause the podcast if you're listening back to it later and take a look.
If you're listening on Spotify, just turn on your phone and it's now a video. So just do it that way.
Yeah, it's not the bridge I'm looking at. That's
All right, Stephen,
Sydney.
Jake,
Sydney.
Josh.
Sydney.
Yep. Audience also has it. The little spiky thing in the background kind of gives it away. It is Sydney. Question 2. October 21st, 1977. Author Catherine Patterson publishes what novel? In the story, 2 children explore the woods by their homes and create a make-believe kingdom. But one of them ultimately drowns when a rope swing they use to get to it breaks.
Whoa, dark. This is very incorrect, but I'm going to write it anyway. Go ahead.
Stephen,
Bridge to Terabithia.
Jake,
Swiss Family Robinson.
Josh.
I'm going to pass. I am clueless.
All right. Well, Stephen demonstrating his exceptional knowledge of children's lit. It's Bridge to Terabithia.
Wow. Never seen it. Never read it. Don't know anything about it.
It was a good movie, too.
All right. I just hated the name, so I didn't want to watch it.
Question 3. April 27th, 1986. The city of Pripyat is evacuated one day after what power plant became, shall we say, inoperable?
Shall we say?
So, you know that I can picture the entire TV series about it, and I cannot remember what the dadgum name is. This is so stupid. No, got it. Hush. Y'all hush your mouths.
We weren't saying anything. You were the one saying something.
Your eyes were saying lots of words.
All right, Stephen.
Well, this is redneck spelling, but Chernobyl.
Chernobyl
Jake.
with the correct spelling.
Yeah, there we go.
It is Chernobyl.
Great HBO series.
That was, yeah. Excellent HBO series.
Yeah. Exhausting.
Question 4. June 12th, 2000. What London pedestrian bridge, nicknamed Wibbly Wobbly, is closed for repairs only 2 days after it opened due to intense resonance-induced swaying? It does not reopen until 2002.
We're looking for the name of the bridge?
Yes.
I can just see all the Cockney people up there just, oh, the wibbly wobbly.
All right, go ahead, I guess.
Stephen?
I'm just guessing. Wimbledon.
I
Jake?
said not quite London Bridge.
Josh?
I had no idea, so I just wrote Bodie McBoatface.
Yes.
When in doubt.
Yeah.
My
I hate to say
Van's name is Vanny McVanface.
I hate to say it, but the audience does have this one. Built in 2000, this is the Millennium Bridge.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Big hint.
He gives clues. He does give clues.
Question 5. June 1st, 2003. What Chinese dam begins partial operations? Over the next decade, the filling of the reservoir behind the dam displaces over 1 million people. Apparently, the construction of this dam was goes back to Chairman Mao. He wrote a poem about wanting to build a dam here in the 1950s.
Okay.
Steven?
Three Gorges.
Jake?
Damn.
Josh?
I feel like Steven was correct. I couldn't think, so I just wrote the Yellow Dam.
Hey, that's a good guess.
I like it.
It is the Three Gorges Dam.
I was really expecting a Chinese name, so this is very disappointing.
I'm sure it has a Chinese name, but I would not
I don't
attempt to pronounce it.
I'm guessing they don't just say it in English.
It had an effect on Earth's rotation. It was so large.
What?
Wow.
Yeah, it holds so much water. Like when they built it, they're saying it wobbled the Earth's axis.
I
Where's
heard
my
that it
vote
makes
on
the
that?
Earth.
Goodness.
It makes each day 1 microsecond longer or something.
There you go. Yeah.
Because more of Earth's mass is farther away from the center, which impacts.
Wow.
So you know when an ice skater is spinning around and they can put their arms out to slow them down and then put their arms back in and then they start going faster. That's essentially what the dam did, but to the Earth.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I know what Zane Boitano would do.
All right. Question 6. April 29th, 2024, Unit 4 of Plant of Vogel opens, making it the largest nuclear plant in the United States. What utility company operates the plant and owns a plurality of it?
I don't know. Very specific.
Alrighty, Steven?
That would be Georgia Power, sir, or Southern Company.
Jake?
GE.
Josh?
Yeah. We were thinking the same, even though I don't think it's correct.
Yeah, I think he's right because I think I've been to that power plant.
And I don't
Audience
think
also
GE is a
says-
utility company.
I think you're correct.
Audience also says GE, so you at least don't have to feel bad.
Hey.
But it is Southern Company, aka Georgia Power.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ferried one of the inspectors to that power plant to do his inspection. I just sat around the facility all day and then drove him home from Atlanta.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like a 4-hour drive. Yeah.
Yep. And just sat there for 4 hours and then drove him 4 hours back home. Whatever.
All right. Well, at the end of round 2, we've got Josh with 8, Audience with 9, Jake with 10, and Steven with 16.
Dad gum, Steven. Just going to town tonight.
Wow. It was all
Technically-
downhill after that cat's guess for me.
Technically, still anyone's game, though. So, round
Sure.
3, straights. Question 1. This big rock is an icon of what strait that separates the Iberian Peninsula from Africa and serves as the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean?
Been there, crossed it. It was great. I got seasick. Go ahead, Zane.
Steven?
Gibraltar.
Jake?
Gibraltar.
Josh?
Yeah, I think the spelling's wrong, but Gibraltar.
It is the Strait of Gibraltar.
Hey, I spelled that one right. Y'all got me on Chernobyl.
Fair.
Question 2. What strait leads into San Francisco Bay from the Pacific Ocean? Steven?
That is a trick question, sir, because there are no straits in San Francisco.
Dadgummit, Steven. Mine's the Strait of Gays.
Almost positive it's not right, but it's the Strait of San Francisco. I don't know.
Fair enough.
That's actually closer than you might think, because the name of this strait is the Golden Gate.
The Golden Gate Strait.
Hence the name of the Golden Gate Bridge, which goes over the Golden Gate.
Huh. Real original.
Which means that the basketball team... I suppose they're Golden State, not Golden Gate. Never mind.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, don't make a joke. Move on.
All right. Question 3. If you see the white chalky cliffs pictured here, it means you are in what strait that separates Great Britain from continental Europe?
You got this, Steven.
I know. I can see the map. I can see it on the map.
I guarantee you I didn't get it. So let's just go. Let's just move on.
All right.
Yeah.
Steven?
That would be the White Strait. Yeah.
Jake?
I said the channel, and then I put in parentheses Dover because those are what those cliffs are, just to try to get extra credit.
Josh?
Yeah, I think I went wrong here. English Channel.
So... it actually didn't occur to me that English Channel probably is also a correct answer to this question.
Oh.
But the answer I was going for was the Strait of Dover.
Hey!
Wow.
But I will give Josh credit as well, because English Channel probably should also be correct.
I would agree with that. I thought it was the English Channel.
Audience also gets that one.
No, they don't. Nah.
All right, last question. If Jake gets it and Steven doesn't, then it's a tie.
Oh!
I don't have a video for a tie though. Whatever.
Well, I have a tiebreaker question.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Question 4. What British band's discography includes Making Movies in 1980, Love Over Gold in 1982, and Brothers in Arms in 1985?
I'm so effed. I'm so effed.
Steven's looking pretty happy.
I have 2 of those vinyls and 1 of those CDs.
Dadgummit. I'm not getting this right. Me and Steven don't have the same music taste.
I think you're going to be shocked when you hear this.
All right.
Steven, take it away.
Dire Straits.
Jake.
Well, it makes sense that we're in their straits category. Son of a bee. I said Rolling Stones.
Josh.
I went the other way, the Beatles, which I recognize the years don't really work out there.
Yeah, I mean, same with Rolling Stones.
Audience also has it. It is Dire Straits. Which means final scores for tonight. Josh was 14, Jake was 16, audience was 18, and our winner tonight is Steven with 22.
Wow.
All right. Josh, you and me are the losers tonight, buddy.
That's quite all right. I'm honestly
right,
surprised
Steven.
you didn't throw a Strait of Hormuz in there.
Yes.
That would be too predictable.
Have you guys seen the video of the guy that's going to No King rallies saying, we keep talking about the Straits of Hormuz, but why is no one talking about the gays of Hormuz? yeah, we really need to be talking about them.
Yeah, because he's the Ayatollah.
All right. Congratulations, Steven, on your victory. Well earned.
Appreciate that.
You murdered. You just murdered everybody. So
Nice scoring game tonight all around.
And the band name Dire Straits gets their name from, is it the Odyssey?
Really?
where Odysseus and his men were going through. So there was a cliff, and then there was a whirlpool, and you were between Scylla and Charybdis, and that's the dire straits.
Oh yeah, because that's also where we get the expression between a rock and a hard place.
Correct.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
well,
the
I came
cliff,
from
there was
that
a
one
cyclops
part.
up on the cliff that was going to throw boulders at your ship, and if you went too far, like far enough out to sea to avoid that, you got caught in the whirlpool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there we go. Y'all, I should have said this at the beginning of the show. I got a hard out at 10 o'clock Eastern. So we've got about 13 minutes to wrap this up. So we're going to skip over the Ford and GM section. Basically, all that was that the government has asked Ford and GM to prepare to start manufacturing weapons.
Oh no.
That's basically what happened. So sit on that because that doesn't bode well for things in the future.
Wow.
Yeah. So instead, we're going to move on to Drunkard of the Week.
I am not fucking drunk.
Well, 19th are blue.
Every pretty girl deserves to go to a ball.
This is everything about it's a clam. I love it.
I gotta be honest with you, I feel like I'm a little bit too drunk to stand up.
On Wiedersehen, asshole.
I'm drunk right now.
All right. Welcome to Drunkard of the Week, the part of the show where we show somebody saying or doing something that can only be explained if they're drunk, but they're not. You can submit, folks. You can submit videos via our Discord or via Twitter, X. Just tag us at Liberty Libation or use hashtag Drunkard of the Week. This week's, it's actually like a 2.5 minute Drunkard of the Week. And there you go.
What? That was wrong? So he was parked more than 18 inches from the curb on the right lane of a two-way road. So he was out.
On earth are you going to know that you're parking more than 18 inches? What time of day or night was this?
Your Honor.
Is it parking while black now? Come on.
Your Honor, there's no time listed. It just says the officer was on patrol around the 3518 block of Arbor Glen Drive when he observed the vehicle parked more than 18 inches from the curb.
And so he goes up to the car because of that?
No, Your Honor. A female passenger side exited the passenger side and approached their vehicle, and he observed a marijuana from
because he comes up to them, right? Stop. Are you losing?
The officer wrote as he ran the vehicle, presumably the license plate.
Right, he pulls them over.
They were already parked on the side of the road 18 inches from the curb, and he came, I guess, parked behind, and he was running the vehicle, and then the passenger side door opened, a black female exited and approached his vehicle, the patrol vehicle, and he observed an odor of marijuana on the female, and then he made contact with the driver, where he observed marijuana odor in the vehicle. So the female approached the patrol vehicle.
Show me that code. What is the penal code for that?
Regarding the 18 inches from the curb, sir, is that the issue of what we're talking about?
Because they come to him because he comes to them, right? They're just parked. He comes to them. It's got to be a transportation code, not penal code, you know?
And Your Honor, regarding the timeline of events, it does appear that when they were parked that distance away, which could be arguably further, I don't know what it looked like at that time, but the female passenger is the one who exited first, and that was before officers ever made contact with them. So I don't know if you were thinking that the officers approached them first, but I just wanted to clarify that she approached first.
What time of day or night was this?
At 4 in the morning.
And Your Honor,
4 in the morning.
4:30 a.m.
And he can delineate at 4 in the morning that parking 18 inches from a curb.
And I found the regulation, the statute in the transportation code where it says you have to park within 18 inches.
4 in the morning, you can tell.
Your Honor, the officer was, yes.
I don't think so. All right, I'm going to find no probable cause. All right, guys, be careful, right? They're always out there. Just be careful. Do something with your life. Knowledge is power. Get into school, get an education, do something with your life. Life is hard as it is. And it only gets more difficult the older you get. All right? Yes, please.
And we'll be sure to call the officer on this case to
Whatever you need.
understand why he did, in fact, pull them over for this amount of space.
We want to be free to do what we want to do. Yeah. We want to get loaded. Yeah. And we want to have a good time.
I couldn't figure out what this guy's name was, but I freaking loved it. I loved it. So he is our drunkard of the week. And yeah, like I said, you can nominate folks via our Discord or Twitter.
It does raise the question of you can be parked more than 18 inches away from the curb by being parked 19 inches away or by being parked in the lane where other people are driving.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Josh, man, phenomenal conversation. We'd love to have you back on at some point.
I'd love to.
I think we'd skip everything else and just have a conversation for 2 hours because I think you've got a lot of interesting things to say.
Well, give me a chance to read up on monetary theory and
yeah, we'll have two of our
Reserve.
other guys here next time who enjoy other topics. Yeah, we'll get a little wacky with Alden as well.
As long as it's not Bitcoin, I'm good.
Well, that would have been my next topic of conversation. So. But Josh, I want to know, like, what would be your pitch to? So, like, conservatism is a completely separate thing from the Republican Party. Libertarian Party libertarianism is a political philosophy. So it doesn't have morality in and of itself. So what would be your pitch to, let's just say, libertarians like us to join the more conservative movement of what you're trying to promote?
If I'm understanding correctly, you're talking about joining the conservative movement as opposed to becoming Republicans. Is that what you mean?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Until I can say the Republican Party, I'm not necessarily advocating you join that. Oh gosh, that's an excellent question, and I think each of us are going to have different things that ping us differently. I kind of harkening back from what we had talked about earlier. I think conservatism, rightly understood, is that project of trying to rescue Western civilization, and trying to reinvigorate. And maybe rescue isn't always the right word. Just trying to explore and expand and defend and enjoy Western civilization. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap between a libertarian and conservative. I think, as you gentlemen all mentioned, you have and Jake, maybe you didn't, but I think all of you did in some degree or another describe a small c conservative cultural lifestyle, if you will, if not necessarily embedded within the conservative movement. I think that conservatism, honestly, is a pretty good arbiter in a time in which we're very unmoored. It has a broader appeal than libertarianism. Let me put it that way. I think we humans are such that there's always going to be some Ayn Randian band out there of hardcore libertarians, and they're just always going to be with us, and that's cool. Jonah Goldberg says he thinks the nation would be better off if every federal agency had at least one libertarian on the board saying, "What if we just didn't do anything?" And I would agree with that.
Yep.
I think, though, that if we're talking about the restoration of Western civilization, we're talking about the restoration and the rescuing and the defense of small L liberalism, liberal institutions with the United States and liberties that we enjoy. I think you have to have an invigorated conservative movement because it is something that individuals who have who see not only liberty but also virtues and order as part of the full package of what makes for a good and a decent life. I think conservatism has an appeal that can reach those individuals in a way that sometimes libertarianism cannot. And so maybe that's not an argument for why libertarians need to be conservatives, but it is an argument, I think, for why we need each other and why we at times are on the same fight against the excesses of, I don't want to just say the left, but let's say authoritarian of all sizes, because there's more and more on the right now, a lot of authoritarianism out there. I think that I think we learn a lot from each other. The libertarian impulse does check the tendency of a conservative movement to become authoritarian in and of itself. And I do think conservatives can check libertarianism in the sense that it can call them back to those, I'm going to say those cohesive things that imbue our lives with virtue and value that are not liberty in and of themselves, but liberty depends upon them.
Man, great pitch, man.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And in a certain sense, I would definitely consider myself to be a member of the broad conservative movement already. Like, we've seen what happens when, like, libertarians treat liberty as an end rather than a means. means,
Yeah.
or rather than a tool.
Yeah.
And treating liberty as an end in itself is something that you absolutely do not want, because it's super cringe.
I think
Super
it's
cringe.
always
That's a technical term.
important. Yeah. And here we need to be broad enough that we're not talking about a specific religion, but even though I have, again, specific religious views, I think rightly understood, liberty is the pursuit of virtue. I think it is the ability to be the sort of people we are created and ought to be. If liberty becomes nothing more than the exercise of my base impulses, that's not really liberty. That's an imprisonment to my base impulses. And again, I'm not saying that libertarianism is imprisoned by that. I'm just saying that we need to all find individually in our lives ways to work the truth that virtue is really what we're aspiring to. Liberty is the blessing of God that's given for us to pursue that path.
I mean, this is very Augustinian, right? Like the idea of liberty as being able to achieve your telos, if I'm allowed to say that word on this show. It's like you are created to like have a specific purpose for your life, to achieve certain ends. And your freedom is your ability to do that, not just do whatever you feel like.
Heck yeah. Well, yeah, Josh, like I said, fantastic having you on, man. Everybody go check out his site, savingelefantsblog.com. Let me pull it up. There we go. You can listen to the podcast, read the blog, watch video clips, subscribe. Go check it all out, man. Because, I've been checking it out over the last couple weeks, and you do some great stuff, and I really have enjoyed it. So keep doing what you're doing. And we're going to watch a few funny videos. You can stick around and watch with us, or if you need to duck out, you're welcome to duck out. We're going to watch, I think we got like 6 funny videos that I've found on that I have and other members have found on Instagram and Twitter and stuff that we're just going to watch and then be done for the evening. So
I can stick around for a bit. I just want to say, hey guys, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and I do appreciate the good-natured pushback, because I need it too.
We all do, man. That's a very necessary thing. If I didn't get pushback from anybody, I would end up being one of those, like, liberty is the end goal, and just subject to my own base impulses. Like it would not end well for me. But fortunately, I've got a good group of friends who slap me around every once in a while. So that's been great. All right. Hang on one second, and I'll pull up the final videos. All right. I think this is from Steven.
Fart burns approximately 57 calories. And if you farted 61 times today, you burn 1 pound of fat.
Those are some rookie numbers. And it's part of my weight loss plan.
One fart.
Oh, so thinking good. Let's see. So, Josh, this one's a little inside baseball. If one of our guys, actually me, Steven, Alden, and Nick, like to go on crazy conspiracy theory rants every now and then that Zane finds utterly abhorrent and stupid. And so this, we imagine this is what we sound like to him.
One last dragon. There is one Ghidorah. It's from space. He's an alien that came down here to fight. And then he got frozen, and they're saying it's because of the ice age. And so that's why they're like so upset about global warming, because they know if that dragon thaws out, because what happens in the Bible? A dragon thaws out and then takes over the world. What happens in every single culture? There's dragons on every single civilization on this planet has a picture of a dragon.
So you're saying Republicans want to melt the ice to release the dragon?
Yes, because they're lizards.
Whoa.
That's why they don't want us to be making dinosaurs.
Yeah.
That's why they keep trying to put out this propaganda about Jurassic Park. They're all going to eat us, but no, they helped us fight them, the Bigfoots, the Yetis. Like we all got together. We all spoke one language. You think I'm crazy? You think I'm lying?
No, I agree with you.
There are pyramids that go directly in Egypt that line up with Orion's belt, right?
Yes.
Orion's belt. They line up with Orion's belt, which is a white dwarf, which is made out of diamonds. And you need diamond and gold to travel in space, right? So interdimensional travel, they will put a diamond in there to go up there. So I think the fight happened where they broke the church, because if you think about Orion's belt, who is Orion the hunter, Who's a Ryan Hunter fight? The bull. But if you really take a good drawing of the bull that has a red eye, it looks like a dragon. Instead, they just drew it like a Taurus to say like, oh, this is Taurus, but it's a dragon. Orion was fighting the dragon, but it's two dogs. But I think they were actually dinosaurs that beat the dragon, and that's why they don't have interdimensional travel. But if you think, even if you line up when the Anunnaki were supposed to be on this planet,
Yeah.
if you line up when the Anunnaki supposed to be on the planet, and you Google the distance it takes to get light years away,
Yeah.
it's the exact same time. They only came here for gold because you need. Gold is the only metal that does not like do like.
Yeah, but what do they need the gold for?
Like to build the satellite. That's why we use gold for everything. That's why gold will never have a standard. That's why there's no more gold that can ever be made. They go to planets and they try to have this dimensional travel, but then the dragon came over from the red giant, Canis Major, flew over to there, came down to America with these octopus and raccoons and a dragon, and they tried to take us over, but with the dinosaurs' help.
You're saying we need the dinosaurs.
We need them.
So that's.
See, the problem with this is it's just Poe's law. Like, I think that Alden probably actually thinks this.
I don't think he thinks this. And this guy sounds like a low-rent Terrence Howard. That's what I concluded.
I got a jet, fellas. Y'all have a great night.
See you, Steven.
See you.
Steve.
All right. For those introverts out there, this one's for you.
Food later if you wanted to come. I don't.
What?
You guys have fun though, okay? Send me pictures.
I called you yesterday.
I know. I watched it ring both times actually. You called me twice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to the party Friday?
I can't.
Why?
I have plans on Saturday.
The party's on Friday.
I know. I just can't do two things in a row. So, no.
Hey, sorry to bother you.
Yeah, then don't. Ooh. Go.
Okay.
Keep going. Have a great day.
What do you do now?
You should like go home.
Oh, are we going to my place?
No, like leave.
Huh?
Yeah. Get out.
Ooh. Hey, we're grabbing food later.
I relate to that on a very primal level. And then final video of the night. There you go.
You know, and some of you say white people don't have any culture. Then what is this? I don't think you understand the heritage and athleticism it takes to be a professional, whimsical skedaddler. You know?
So stinking good.
White people cultures to go places in ambulances, the comment says.
It did say that. That's hilarious. It's to go places. No, it says go places ambulances can't.
Oh, okay. I missed the last part.
Which is actually even funnier. Yeah, ambulances can't. All right, y'all. Thank y'all, everybody out there, for tuning in to episode 172 of Liberty Libations. Go check out Saving Elephants and come back next week. We'll be back. I'll be back hosting again, 2 in a row. Rare occasion right now. So come back and we'll see you then. Peace.
Join the crew and let's ascend!